This will be my last video for a while because, as most of you will probably be unaware, I'm actually headed back to the UK for pretty much the whole month of July. And of course I'm going to be returning to Japan, but I wanted to put a little quick video together about the games that I'm going to be playing when I go away. And I'm going to be mostly playing on my Game Boy here, so this is one that I have handily modified and so forth to have a nice IPS screen and custom shell. But I just wanted to give you a quick little run through, both with my history of the Game Boy and also the 10 or so games that I'll be taking back to the UK to play. So, just a little bit of backstory about myself and the Game Boy. When I was little, I didn't actually have a Game Boy. I remember it was probably around about 1990, 91, something like that. And I was about 7 or 8 years old at the time. And usually every Christmas, just before we broke up for the holidays and so forth, we would have like a non-uniform day where we could wear what we wanted, within reason I guess, and basically we could bring in a board game or something like that we could play. So basically you could always spot the kid who always got the great presents when they brought in a Mr. Frosty. Well, anyway, one year one kid, he brought in something that none of us had ever seen before. It was a Game Boy. Not this particular model of Game Boy, it was the original model, the original DMG as it seems to get called these days. Bit of a brick. And we was absolutely amazed by this amazing device. And I remember asking at some point, whether it was shortly after that or the following year, asking my parents, could I get a Game Boy? And the answer was a resolute no. Not only was the system a bit too expensive, around about £70 for the unit, the games thereafter are anywhere in the region of around about £20, maybe £25 for the better games. So that pretty much ruled it out. And that was the only time that I actually really remember ever asking my parents for a game system of any description. So anyway, I just want to give you a very quick run through of the 10 or so games that I'll be taking with me, with some actual gameplay footage. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. So the first game I want to quickly mention is Tetris. Doesn't need any introduction. Absolutely addictive puzzle game. Something that I can pretty much play endlessly and still want to have another go with. In fact, this is probably the game that will make you realise that even after a 27-hour flight or trip in total, you'll still be a little bit sorry that you've actually finally arrived because you just want one more go. But yeah, absolute classic and available very cheap in Japan. If you can't pick up a copy for about 300 yen or so, which I don't know what that translates to these days in dollars, but let's say $1.50 or something like that. You're not looking hard enough. The next game that I want to talk about is Burger Time Deluxe. A little bit overlooked. This is a bit of an arcade classic from Data East, but this is probably the definitive version outside of the arcade. It might seem pretty much a simple, sort of slightly cutesified port to start with, but as you start to explore its levels, it starts to open out with multi-screen layouts and so forth. And whilst it's a little bit short, it plays beautifully and such a good little time waster on the Game Boy. My next choice is going to be Lock and Chase, another Data East classic from back in the early days of the arcades in the early 80s or so, I believe. Basically, at first it looks a bit like a straight up Pac-Man clone with slightly cutesified graphics. But the gimmick with this one is that not only do you have slightly enhanced visuals over the original Pac-Man, but the neat thing is that as you pass particular points in the level layout, you can actually lock the path behind you, thus meaning that the guards or the policemen that are chasing you can't get through. So, but otherwise the mechanics are very similar to Pac-Man, and definitely a bit of an overlooked gem, I think. You can find this game all day long for about 500 yen in Japan, which I'm going to guess is about $3 US, so definitely worth a pickup. My next choice is Kirby Pinball. Not really a big fan of pinball in real life. I love looking at the tables, I find them very mesmerising, but never really got into playing real life pinball, or indeed actually most pinball games when it comes to computers. But when it comes to pinball on the go, Kirby Pinball is fantastic. 3 table layouts, some bonus levels, bosses to beat. It's just basically a game that I just find myself sinking hours into without even realising, and I'm still trying to beat the high scores that were set by the previous owners of the cartridge. But yeah, a really great playthrough, all the usual Kirby tropes and sounds and enemies and so forth. Fantastic, and can be found all day long in Japan for about 300 yen, so a definite must. Another game that I'm going to be taking with me is Rodland. Now, this was a little bit of a lesser known arcade game. I never played it in the arcades. In fact, I don't even ever recall seeing it in the arcades. But I found out about it through the Amiga port, which is just fantastic, and one of the few times where I feel like the Amiga port of an arcade game just knocks it out of the park. Obviously, the Game Boy version lacks the colour, but has every inch and every ounce of the original's gameplay. And yeah, just really good playthrough, lots of levels, great music, has the cutscenes. Yeah, and even it has a little two-player mode, but rather than using a link cable, it basically allows you to just switch between players by handing the Game Boy to each other. So definitely looking forward to playing through Rodland on the Game Boy a bit more. I also wanted to take something that wasn't a puzzle game, but allowed me to get into the series a bit better, and my choice is Nemesis. Now, this is basically a thinly veiled version of Gradius, obviously a massive arcade hit, massive on the NES and so forth, and many other systems, fantastic on the PC Engine, for example, and has had many sequels. But Nemesis on the Game Boy is absolutely superb. I've only played the first 2 levels of it, but I've also picked up Nemesis 2, which was known as Gradius the Interstellar Assault, I think, in the West, which, from what I've played, plays even better, but I don't want to play that one until I've played the first one, so wanted something that I could sink my teeth into, because I do love a good shmup, and it really goes to show just how fantastic that, though it was black and white and pretty primitive even for its time, the Game Boy had some really stunning games. Another puzzle that I'm going to be taking with me is Solomon's Club. Now, this is not quite a direct port of the NES or arcade Solomon's Key, but it's another puzzle game where you basically take the lead character, Dana, I think is the little wizard's name, and you have to basically get access to the key, which unlocks the exit to the level. But along the way, obviously, you're going to meet various types of enemies, some shooting projectiles, some breathing fire and so forth, and other objects that you can pick up and so forth, which allows you to purchase items in the shop, some of which are essential in many cases to get through a particular stage. So yeah, it looks like a lot of fun. A game that I played a little bit of on the Commodore 64, actually, many years ago. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And again, quite cheap in Japan, although slightly more expensive than your average Game Boy game here. But I picked up a fairly decent copy for about 1,000 yen, so that's definitely worth it in my book. I just want to quickly mention that I basically pick up most of my Game Boy games cartridge only. The only exception to that was Tetris, because it's iconic. I basically didn't pick up Tetris until I found a nice mint box copy, but otherwise I only buy loose Game Boy cartridges because I can store them easily. Okay, another little cool puzzle that I'm going to take with me is Pitman, known as Catrap in the North America region. Sadly, I don't believe this game was actually released in the European region, but this is a fantastic little puzzler, quite an early release and relatively cheap to pick up. Maybe sometimes a little bit harder to track down than some Game Boy games, but certainly seems to be pretty reasonable when I have found it. About 500 yen or so should secure you a good copy. The good thing about this game is that it involves a very neat mechanic where you can basically reverse or forward through your actions, so you don't have to restart a level when you slightly mess it up. It borrows a little bit of the box moving puzzle, the Sokoban style sort of puzzler, where you basically have to move blocks to fill gaps or to get access to different platforms. But its take on that mechanic is so interesting and innovative and unique that it's just a non-stop sort of playthrough, as it were. So, yeah, just a wonderful little puzzler, I think, and very cute as well, which has got that lovely sort of Japanese aesthetic to it. So, definitely a highly recommended pickup. Okay, my last choice is probably just a little bit offbeat, but bear with me on this one because this goes a little bit into my gaming history again. Whenever I used to visit my cousins in London, it seemed like they always had a new system. I seem to think initially it was the Commodore 64, and then another year they would have the NES, or they would have a Game & Watch and so forth, and then it was the Super Nintendo, and then lastly the PlayStation. But I always remember maybe when both of my cousins weren't actually in at the time because they were a little bit older than me. Maybe I was there with my aunt and my mum and so forth, and I'd just be sort of a bit bored, and so I'd get given this old Game & Watch that obviously belonged to one of my cousins. Now, I can't remember for the life of me which Game & Watch it was. It wasn't Donkey Kong, I can definitely remember that. But I used to find it very fun to play, and it was a little bit of a cut above from the usual sort of Systema 3 or Tiger Electronics style sort of handhelds that I had also previously played on. But my choice for the last game is actually the Game & Watch collection, or Game & Watch Gallery as it's called in Japan, and this contains ports of 4 Game & Watch games, Octopus, Manhole, Oil Panic, and I think it's just called Fire or something like that. Now, this is probably a game that might be a little bit repetitive to play and so forth, but highly addictive. And the really nice thing about it is that not only does it contain different difficulty levels, but it also includes the original sort of aesthetic to the Game & Watch games, but also an updated, more modern look to it. So yeah, you get that kind of, I think it calls it Mugashi, which is like long ago in Japanese, and then it's got the Ima version, which is like the current version, shall we say. Now, I've picked up all 3 Game Boy original compatible Game & Watch Gallery series here in Japan, but I'm just going to take the first one because, again, like Kirby Pinball, the previous owner has set some pretty wicked high scores, and I want to see if I can actually beat it. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a challenge though. Really also need to figure out how I can wipe these scores off these cartridges, because some of these games have unlockables, especially the Game & Watch Gallery, for example, and it'd be actually nice to achieve some of those unlockables myself, shall we say. So yeah, that's going to be my last choice. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm going to be flying from Japan very soon. In fact, maybe by the time you watch this, I'm probably been to the UK and come back to Japan, but nonetheless, it's going to be the Game Boy that's going to keep me entertained, both on the flight and whilst I'm wasting the hours in Doha Airport. Anyway, I guess all remains for me to say is see you soon. Peace! So the first game that I'll be taking is, of course, Tetris. There goes the 5 o'clock chime. Still, it's the last time I'm going to hear that, because tonight I get the bus. Da